Yeah.
And here in Doctor Who land, of course, we are always celebrating something. And this year, I think we've got a free pass because 60 is a big old number, and it's the 60th anniversary year of Doctor Who. An ideal time, I thought, for us to go back through. Yeah, I won't quite say 60 bus stops worth, but certainly a regeneration cycle's worth of stops on the journey to take stock of all the incarnations of the Doctor and some of, if not their greatest adventures, then certainly the ones that may get us talking. And when it comes to the Doctors themselves, Sarah, and Great Britain, the home of Doctor Who, in my view, David Tennant is, I won't say a national treasure, but he must be approaching that. So David Tennant inherited the role of the Doctor in 2005, and it was seemingly overnight to a lot of us who were there watching the rebirth of either our long-standing favourite show or our new favourite show. In your case, it was all about to take flight over that spring and into summer. But the truth of the matter was that David Tennant had been sounded out about succeeding Christopher Eccleston in the role late in 2004. So it was all sort of done and dusted by the time it was back on telly during the time that he'd been working on Casanova with Russel T Davis, wasn't it? So, yeah, the 32-year-old actor, he was initially very anxious about the idea of accepting the role of his own childhood hero, but he needn't have worried, really. David Tennant proved to be the right man at the right time, and the nation took him into their hearts pretty much in an instant, didn't they, Sarah?
It was. Can you go back to 2005? It was a very random few months, because I remember obviously tuning in and following the newspapers and the magazines that were coming out, because I'd start reading it, and the headline would be, "Oh, Doctor Who's back," and it's a success. And then I think it was literally the next day, it was, Christopher Eccleston is leaving, shock, exit. And we already knew that his replacement was going to be David Tennant. And it was really weird to get my head around. Like, we've only just known this person playing the Doctor. And I'd seen David Tennant in a couple of other things. I had seen him in Casanova. I can't remember. Did Casanova come out before Doctor Who?
It was around the same time. I think there was a week either side of the broadcast, something like that.
But I remember that article, and I was like, oh no.
What a horrible picture of David Tennant there. That picture there, the black and white one's awful, isn't it?
It is. Oh, look, it looks like Joffrey.
Yeah.
It looks really smarmy.
Well, I've always thought, and I know that David Tennant is a very good-looking man. He's got a legion of admirers out there, of men and women, both fancy the pants off this guy. To me, I always thought he looked a little bit like a weasel, and and I loved him in Casanova. I sincerely, in fact, everything I'd seen him in numerous things.
I loved him in Casanova, but I couldn't marry that, him as Casanova with what I was watching on screen with Chris Eccleston. And I'd already got that fierce attachment to Chris and to Billy. Sorry, Ian, go on.
No, I just said, I think throughout the years, I began to appreciate Chris Eccleston. When he first was introduced as the Doctor, I thought it was a complete miscast when I first saw it. Originally, when I saw the first episode, as you guys know, because we did a review on it and stuff like that, I thought it was a complete miscast. I thought his humor was completely wrong. The way he played the Doctor was wrong. It's only when we got to Dalek I begin to appreciate him as a dramatic actor, because he brought a lot of gravitas to that episode, and I think, okay, maybe he can work. And then when we got to the end with the Daleks and with Rose kissing him and all that stuff, and he changes, I thought to myself, he wasn't that bad. In other words, what I'm saying is that it didn't affect me as much as
it won you over.
When he changed from him to David Tennant, I just said what the Brigadier said. Here we go again. Do you know what I mean? So it didn't really affect me that much, But
it was an intense time, wasn't it, Ian?
Yeah.
To watch that show screen, to see it come back to life, people latch onto it, and then for the lead actor to change and to bring in somebody who was still large. Okay, he was been in this big drama, but was still largely unknown. I mean, I went straight onto Gallifrey Base. I think it was still Outpost Gallifrey then.
Yeah.
And I posted, because I didn't know who read these things, so I posted, I can't believe they've gone with this guy. He looks like a weasel. I did. And then a few years later, I read a story where David Tennant had said, when I was cast as the Doctor, I went onto Gallifrey Base, and I saw there was numerous people saying, "Oh, he's one of my very favourite actors. I can't believe he's going to be the Doctor." And he was really, he was really pleased, felt really sort of bolstered by that. And he said in this interview, and then I came across a comment from somebody who said, "Why have they gone with him? He looks like a weasel." And then he just wanted to curl up. And I thought, oh my God, that was me.
Infamy.
I don't know. I think what you call it. I think Chris Eccleston's version of the Doctor kind of worked towards the ending, but I don't know. I don't think the dynamic between Rose and him worked for me anyway. I thought the dynamic between Rose and David Tennant's Doctor worked so much better than with Chris Eccleston, and especially, and I know a lot of people don't like this. I really like the romance between Rose and.
It's not for everybody, is it?
I know it's not for everybody. But
I didn't mind it, but I obviously come into it as a newbie.
Yeah,
it wasn't. It wasn't a big deal to me.
Yeah.
But it felt earned because we'd seen them grow and.
And also, the Doctor's allowed to just like human beings, the Doctor should be allowed to have that one person in his life that was the one that shook, shook his heart and he was connected to, and it was Rose. I mean, every other companion that he's been with, that they've never affected him like Rose has. Do you know what I mean? And also, remember, the Doctor is a Time Lord, so when he reaches 100 in Earth years, he's probably only 15. Do you know what I mean? So he's kind of growing. Do you know what I mean? So he's like, what is it, 200 years old here or 400 years old here? So maybe he's just reaching teen. Do you know what I mean? So we have to look at it that way, that he's an alien and the way he sees life is completely different to the way we see life. Do you know
the
what
cycles of his life move differently.
Yeah.
So like wheels within wheels.
Yeah. That's what I
lives
think.
Within lives. And his idea of personal growth would not necessarily be as linear as a human being's life. I mean, in all seriousness, I did say that, and if that was my comment that David read, I was ever so sorry, David, because when I saw this initial publicity picture of David Tennant with Billie Piper there as Rose Tyler and in his suit, I got chills. When I remember seeing Chris Eccleston for the first. I remember seeing Chris Eccleston in his costume for the first time and thinking, "Oh, okay, that's what they're going with. Oh, all right." And it grew on me. But with this, I thought, "Oh my God, the Doctor's back." That
I'm
is
saying,
absolutely the Doctor stood there with his plucky companion.
Yeah. He does. I mean, and when I first saw,
I was instantly back on board here.
Yeah, his coat when he was wearing that picture of him and Billy when he was wearing the coat, I was like, that's definitely a Doctor, right? I had a problem with Chris Eccleston. He looked like I don't know. He was okay. I accepted his costume, whatever. But I don't care what anyone says. The Doctor has to have a freaking costume. I don't care what anyone says because that is what we grew up with. The frilly shirt, the scarf. The multicolored, whatever. Do you know what I mean? He has to have a look. And I think David Tennant is among one of the best. Before David Tennant, I thought Davison's costume was brilliant. The cricket costume, I thought that was brilliant. And then David Tennant came along and blew that out of the water. Do you know what I mean?
It's a similar silhouette. Obviously, the coat is longer. That was a stipulation, wasn't it, Sarah? He said to Russell when he accepted the job, "Look, if I'm taking this job, I want a big, long coat down to there."
I remember that interview.
and obviously because David Tennant is not as tall as Russell T Davis, but he's not far off. He's very tall, a very, very lean, a very athletic man. And so even without this long coat and casting a sort of more foreboding shadow, he is a lot more the traditional heroic figure. Not just than his predecessor, but also than the guy who would come after him too. But I believe that David Tennant, what he brought to his characterization as the Doctor was as well as that heroism, that he was able to tap into, and the physicality of being a man in the prime of his life who was physically very, very capable. So he'd got that, but he'd got this natural quirkiness, a geekiness, for want of a better word, that he'd sort of, I suppose, the person that he'd grown up being, really. He was able to tap into his inner child and let that all off the leash. So you'd got a much more sort of comic book hero incarnation of the Doctor, maybe.
He didn't try to copy the others.
No, not at all. He was full of charisma. And yes, he wasn't using his own native accent, obviously, because David Tennant is a Scot.
That is a good idea.
But I agree with you. Ian. I think his choice in that, I think it was a very wise choice.
Yes, it was.
And I accept that I think we have to acknowledge that it probably wasn't the easy choice, but it was definitely the right one.
But do you see the difference between Chris and him? Chris was trying to be something that he wasn't. So when you see the first episode, I know it wasn't shot in chronicle. How do you pronounce that word? Anyway, I know it wasn't shot in order, but when you see Chris the first time you see him, he was trying to crack jokes, and it wasn't him, as far as I was concerned. Because I've seen Chris in other stuff as well. I was like, no, that's not him, you know. And then when he just tried to be himself, that's when he became the Doctor, as far as I'm concerned. But David Tennant got it on day one. The episode 1, he got his kind of Doctor down. And that I got to take my hat off to him if I had one. I'll take my hat off to David Tennant. David Tennant, yeah.
I remember when it was so frustrating in Christmas Invasion when he's asleep for most of the episode.
Most of the time.
But the times when he was awake, you know, when he tells Jackie to shut up and he just looks at her with that thing.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the old sword fight and the Lion King reference. It was genuinely really funny, and you just couldn't help but warm to him.
As I said, right, I don't think he copied anyone. He's obviously before he became the Doctor, he was a huge fan of Doctor Who. So he must have envisioned himself being the Doctor. Everyone has, me, you, Dan. Do you know what I mean? So he must have brought that vision that he had of himself, if he was the Doctor, to this, you know. And then when he was fully the Doctor is when he goes up to the Prime Minister and you know, he says those, I can stop you with 4 words or 3 words, I can't remember how many words he said, and that was the Doctor to me, and I was on board right across the board, and it didn't affect me as much as Starry-Eyed when Chris went to David, because as I said, I was like, oh, okay, fine, let's move it along. Let's move it along. Let's get somebody.
It was better when he was in his when he got his own costume. It did feel a bit like an imposter until the end when he says fantastic to Rose at the end and holds her hand, and I thought, okay.
But it's a shame.
Can you imagine, Sarah, somebody handing you, Sarah, the job, the part that you'd been playing maybe in your bedroom or the back garden or over the park with your friends since you were like 7, 8 years old? Okay, here it is. What are you going to do with it? You can see why he would have been anxious, can't you?
Well, yeah, it daunting task, and you know, and he is a fan, so he knows what had come before. But he took it seriously. As much fun as it is, you know, however much as a fan and a geek he is, and he is a serious actor. And you've got to take it seriously. And he was, when he's playing the Doctor, he's not pretending.
Yeah.
And you can tell the difference.
Yeah.
And as the 10th incarnation of the Doctor, he led Doctor Who through an astonishingly popular run under Russel T Davis as the showrunner. Award-winning, headline-making era of Doctor Who that the nation flocked to in their millions. And yet there was a run of 3 series and several specials, and with David Tennant's 10th Doctor right at the centre of it, he was one of the biggest, best-known faces on TV that everybody seemed to love, whether it was little kids or little old ladies. Everybody seemed to know who he was and flocked to that show to see David Tennant do his thing and to play his childhood hero his way, which I suppose, you know, there's no way that he could have foresaw how successful it would be. But I think that perhaps having Russell's work obviously would have given him a fair idea of where to take it, but his faith in him too, that it was in safe hands. I'd love to know how much to and fro there was between them. I mean, I've always viewed this incarnation as a little bit of a sort of Columbo type figure, but just with more product in his hair. He's part sort of detective and part supply teacher. And at first glance, he is that classical, not so much swaggering hero. I think Eccleston got the swagger, but certainly the running hero at breakneck speed, but a classic symbol of what they called in the noughties, Sarah, geek chic. Do you remember that expression, geek chic? So this Doctor, he's the first one who, for a lot of women, they meet him and they're all over him. You see, Martha's eyes are practically out on stalks, aren't they? So a lot of women are instantly attracted to this guy, but yet he's outwardly geeky too. So this Doctor, this alien, he knows the lyrics to Ghostbusters, Ian. More to the point, he's not afraid to sing them back to you if you start it off. And that's not something that we'd seen with the character before, I think. An embracing of pop culture.
And he knew Back to the Future as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned it in one episode. So there you go. But the thing about David Tennant, as I said, right, I was quite impressed with the first, not the first episode, the episodes following. He is his own man. He doesn't try to copy. If you look at, say, for instance, you look at Colin Baker. Don't even talk to me about Sylvester. I don't know what Doctor he was, but anyway, he was basically coming off. I know people don't like. Anyway, he was coming off the other.
We're going to get you on the McCoy show. We're going to get you on that review.
It's not. I don't have anything against the man. I just didn't like the way he played the Doctor. But I'm just saying that if you look at Colin Baker and then you look at the Doctor before him. They're very much a type, aren't they? They're very much the classic Doctor type. But David came in and he was gurning and he was shouting, and you know what I mean? So he was his own thing, which is quite good. And then after that, we had Matt, who had his own thing as well. So, but I think Matt was on the same wavelength as David, but he refined it. He refined his.
I think they both did. I think, David Tennant. I think sometimes he was right on the cusp of perhaps over egging it a little in what he was doing, but because he was clearly having so much fun with it, Sarah, because the character was having fun too. I think now and again we saw the Ninth Doctor have fun, but not the way the 10th Doctor does. He has fun and he allows himself to. You see him wallowing now and again, but generally speaking. He has fun. I think the catchphrase "allons-y," which has never, I have to be honest, it's never really appealed to me. No, I always have to look it up and remind myself what it means, but it means "let's go." So why he doesn't just say "let's go"? I don't know, but I suppose that
these catchphrases, they're rubbish.
I like it.
They're from the mind of Russel T Davis, I suppose, aren't they? But you have to wonder. Rather than so when he's saying "let's go," allons-y, is he? Because every time he does do that, so invariably the stakes are up really, really high and probably as bad as they could possibly get. So it's as if every time he does that, he says "let's go." What I feel he could be saying is, just let go of your doubts, your inhibitions, your fears, and plunge headlong into this and use everything within your power to bring this to a satisfactory conclusion, to save as many lives as you can, have as much fun as possible, and to give the people watching the best of times. And that's what I feel. And that's what I feel about this. I'm not joking when I talk about the Russell. When I talk about the Russell T Davis era, this is my favourite era of the show. I just get it, or it gets me. It's exactly in line with how I view this character and view this universe. So I do get a bit gushy when it comes to it, because this incarnation of the Doctor, Sarah, he's having more fun on the outside, but he forgets that he never dealt with his S from before. I think that's also a theme, because now and again it catches up with him, and that's when you see how good an actor David Tennant really is.
Yeah, and I love those moments when the mask slips And you can, because he can be really unassuming. And I mean, Matt Smith played on it even more because he went for like the trouting, bumbling, oh, I'm an idiot, but I'm really a genius. But David used to do it as well, but then suddenly it'd go from just laughing and being happy-go-lucky to just dark.
Yeah.
And the one that always sticks out to me is Family of Blood.
Yeah.
And you get that taste of what what a Time Lord, the power it's got, because I don't think it was actually really addressed in the New Way before that. We kind of know that the Time Lords are powerful, but it's kind of just him on his own. Yes, we know he's clever, he's resourceful, he's witty, but seeing what he can actually do if you do cross him, it was really eye-opening. And the fact that he'd hidden away to protect them, and it was a real, like Eccleston in Dark, it was a real like sit up and take
But you
notice.
can understand why he ran away, because he didn't want to be like the Time Lords. You can imagine the Time Lords, judge, jury, and executioner as well. Mm-hmm. If they want to be, they have too much power, and in my head canon, this is the reason why he ran away. He did not want to be like them. He is the one Time Lord that didn't want to be all powerful, all consuming, which he could be, which it showed in that episode that you just mentioned, Dan. He really did give it to them at the end. Do you know what I mean? With no remorse whatsoever. So that just goes to show what he could have been if he stayed in Gallifrey. Do you know what I mean? So.
Simon Horton often talks about the 10th Doctor, Ian, and he says that during this era, and I think that he enjoys it to some respects, but he's not a major fan. And the reason that he gives is that he feels that the character of the 10th Doctor is exactly the same in the Christmas Invasion as he is at the conclusion, at the end of time, that the character never alters, never develops at all. And
that's not true.
I think that I was wondering what he means by that, and I've spoken to Simon about this several times, and I think he's right in that David Tennant's choices in bringing the character to the screen remain largely the same. There's a few surprises now and again, but I do think that the character evolves. I think it's there on the page, and David Tennant enjoys himself exploring that material, and so therefore so do we.
Yeah. But the thing is that David Tennant he can only be the Doctor what's written on the page. He can only be that what's written on the page. You know what I mean? So it's not David Tennant's fault if Simon thinks he hasn't developed. I personally think he did develop. He went from Chris Eccleston Doctor to being in love, to having that great loss of losing his love, and then right across the board to trying to avoid the regenerating, being angry that his as the woman says, his song is ending. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to go. Do you know what I mean? He's developed. He's gone from being, this powerful person that was in love, to the point where he thinks he hasn't done enough. Do you know what I mean? So it's a bittersweet ending for the 10th Doctor, because the 10th Doctor thought he didn't do enough when he was this version. And so, by default, he has developed.